Rainn Wilson, Lil Rel Howery, and Aimee Carrero team up for the healthcare-themed satire Code 3. Does the mockery of hospitals and insurance survive, or is it DOA? On his last day on the job, a burned-out paramedic plunges into a wild, citywide sprint of 911 calls, where chaos and life-or-death decisions collide. This film goes heavy into both the comedy and the drama, typically doubling down on both emotional fronts so that when it's funny, the dialogue creates laugh-out-loud moments, and when the tone turns somber, it's dark and pointed. Rainn Wilson is Randy, a paramedic who's been on the job for 18 years, and he has reached his breaking point of dealing with the system, the insane bureaucracy, and the profit-over-lives mentality. For his final shift, he and his partner, Mike, played by Howery, get a newbie ride-along that they have to keep an eye on amidst all the regular EMS nonsense they deal with. Carrero is Jessica, the ride-along, and the dynamic that the three share, somewhere in the middle of sweet and toxic, where emotions run super high and cutting words are used, but there's also some camaraderie and growth that's shown. Wilson is amazing in his role of Randy. He's got the gruff and fed-up persona nailed. But what creates the engaging depth of the character is the amalgamation of passion and empathy that he displays. If he were to only display anger or frustration, the character would be flat and boring. But thanks to the swings that he creates, the energy he gives off is magnetic. And for anyone that's ever been stressed over a job, or even just someone who's had to deal with the frustrations in the US healthcare system, Randy is a relatable figure who points out a lot of what many know and think, but don't have the power to address. Howery has a smaller role, but he's no less important. He adds some well-timed dry humor that works to accentuate the satire and sarcasm. There's one scene that is a heart-pounding, anxiety-filled adrenaline shot, and Howery paints a vivid picture of terror, stress, then bewildered relief for the character, allowing us to see righteous rage at a situation that is all too real and happens far too often, especially where people of color are affected. The energy of this scene starts off with excellent humor, and then it transitions into a poignant commentary on the lack of de-escalation practiced within law enforcement. I could feel my heartbeat rising because the sequence feels real. I was no longer watching a movie, but became a sequestered bystander who could only watch things play out. And then we've got Carrero. She's quiet, but attentive, and she makes mistakes in convincing ways. These aren't dumb flubs or errors that showcase her to be an idiot, but instead that highlight the difference between Randy and her simply based on experience in the field and dealing with issues that are off the wall and bizarre. She's wonderful as the third in the trio within the rig. And while she starts off a bit cocky and opinionated, she showcases great growth and humility, instantly changing the character from one who teetered on being off-putting to one who was very endearing. For the satirical bend of the movie, there are times when this veers more into the angry and melancholy vibe than one that is lighter in tone. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are definite periods within the storytelling when the plot feels as though it's two completely different genres, each battling, maybe alternating, for dominance. Even if it does feel a bit odd to experience, the messaging is brutal and on point. The dialogue is electrically charged and biting, tearing into how insurance companies in the US operate, how the politics of hospital hierarchy can put patients at risk, and the general lack of awareness the public has for the paramedics who fight to save lives with minimal compensation. Now, sometimes the narrative does become a bit preachy and overbearing, like placing dollar figures across each profession on the screen to illustrate the disparities in pay. But for each time the story does get a little too in the face, it also uses heartbreaking emotion to both humanize the characters and then drive home the point in a different way. There's also fourth wall breaking done solely by Wilson. The interstitials are seamless, flowing between a scene of dialogue between co-stars to addressing us since we've been along for the entire ride. Now, the invitation into the conversation, it works, but it's less of a conversation and more of an aside so that we can dive deeper into Randy's thoughts. Rob Riggle also appears in this, and he nails the smug and pompous ER doctor that the EMS team continues to face over the course of their shift. His character is the perfect portrayal of someone who is so arrogant and probably jaded that his God complex arrives in a room well before he does. And again, this is satire, so the characterization, it's exaggerated. It's not poking fun at ER doctors in particular, but more so the mindset that hospital systems embody in order to minimize costs, cut procedures, and then maximize profit margins, all under the guise of treating people. And we know how the US healthcare system is built, so that it profits when people are sick, not healthy. So to heal, that's not really in the best interest of the bottom line. And there are so many real and relatable moments within the film. Sometimes these build up the messaging, but a few times they slow down the pacing, creating some content that doesn't fully reinforce the story. And these aren't wholly distracting, but because they slow down the efficiency, the hour and 44 minutes does feel a little bit longer than it is. All in all, Code 3 is a fun ride that sometimes gets a bit more serious, downbeat, and somber than it needs to, overshadowing the biting comedy so that it's less funny and more angry. The messaging is direct and poignant, delivered by characters and situations that are sadly relatable. The cast dynamic is engaging, and Rainn Wilson in particular is a joy to watch, alternating between righteous anger, exhausted empathy, and hangry because he never seems to get to sit down and have a meal. The pacing is slower than it needs to be, and the themes are sometimes too preachy. Overall, though, Code 3 revives itself anytime it threatens to flatline, leaving a smile on the face and only slight singe marks on the skin. There's no sex, a little bit of nudity, ton of profanity, and then some violence. I give Code 3 3.5 out of 5 couches. So have you seen any effective satires lately? I would love to hear about what you watched in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.